Started. Thank you for being here. We have a twofer today, if you will. We have the former president and CEO of AT&T Southeastern Division, and also the chairman of the board here at Lipscomb. So excited to have Chairman Scobey here. David and his wife, Debbie, live in Atlanta, but they also commute and spend a lot of time up here in Nashville since they have, I believe, three grandkids here in the Brooklyn area. So his wife is with grandkids today, and we have spent the morning and had interaction with some of you all, been able to spend time with faculty. We're thrilled to have him here today. He is a PE major from Auburn, so I'm sure we've got some Auburn fans in here that might call and hear a little bit when he gets up. But we're excited to have him here and hope you all interact with him and welcome him. Please welcome David Scobey.
Well, Auburn fans are having a rough year, so kind of like Titan fans, I think, so we won't talk about that too much. But it is great to be with you. It's great to be in a room with really, really smart people, because I know in my experience, you got to be smart and willing to work pretty hard to make it through a program in engineering. You don't have quite as much free time as some of the other majors on campus. I'm always amazed when I talk to students and they talk about, man, I just wasn't expecting to have this much free time. And I'm going, man, I don't remember any free time when I was in college. Because you spend a lot of time in labs, don't you? And that sort of cuts into the day quite a bit. But so it's a wonderful career. I'm going to tell you a little bit, just briefly, a little bit about my career. Just to give you a little perspective, but I'm going to mainly talk about kind of how faith played an important role in my career, and hopefully might be of inspiration to you on how faith integrates in a career. And then I'll leave quite a bit of time at the end for questions that you can ask about anything. So that's really the part I enjoy the most. As was said, I graduated from Auburn University with a degree in electrical engineering. Probably there's a lot of reasons I went into engineering. One, my dad was an electrical engineer. That probably had a little influence on it, so there was probably a little DNA that was passed down to me. I always loved tinkering with things, and so from the time I was very young, I would take things apart. I would want to know what was inside the box, what makes that thing work. And I was really good with my hands and tools. I worked on my own cars. And most of the time when I took things apart, I could get them put back together. Not always, but most of the time I could get them put back together. Most of the times they worked after I put them back together. So that was maybe gave me a little bit of hope that maybe I could do this. I still tinker with things to this day. I did a brake job on my truck last week, so I just love doing things like that. Had a really easy time in high school. Straight A's, National Honor Society. And my freshman year of college, I had to have calculus in high school. My freshman year of college, I got put in advanced placement into a Calculus 3 class. And I went into this Calculus 3 class. It wasn't here. And it was all juniors and seniors in there. I was a first semester freshman. The professor wasn't the best professor I had in my college experience. And he had a, and I'm not trying to make fun of him, but just telling you it was difficult. He had a glass eye, one glass eye, and one that worked, and you never were sure which one was which. And when you looked at him teaching, you never knew where to look. And so it was just, the whole thing was just sort of like overwhelming for a freshman. I eked a C out of that class, and I was so proud that I got the C. Okay, so my first semester of college was a very, very different experience than the one I had in high school. And it was like, this is going to be a little harder than I thought. Let's see, probably the other college class. Anybody take electromagnetic fields? Do you have a course called electromagnetics or whatever? Man, do you get it? I never got it, okay? It was like, I'm not so sure about that. And then outside the engineering program, modern physics with special relativity and all that was like, it was just kind of an overwhelming, mind-boggling class as well. But all the rest of it I enjoyed pretty well. I even enjoyed those ones I didn't do as well in. But so I was not a straight A college student. Like I said, my very first semester, the straight A guy gets a C, and he's trying to figure all this out. But it worked out in the long run. When I was in college, I co-opted with the phone company and enjoyed that work. I kind of recognized it was very helpful in doing that, getting to go to school, kind of see how there is real application for the stuff that I'm learning. That was a very meaningful experience to me. If you get a chance to co-op, get a chance to do a summer internship, I'd really encourage it because it's a really, really valuable experience. So when I graduated, I had a lot of job offers. The market was really, really good, but I ended up going to work for the company I had co-op with. It also happened to be the lowest starting salary of all the offers that I had. But I went there anyway, enjoyed the work. Worked out pretty good in the end for me. I started in the areas of engineering, did a lot of engineering work, went to Denver on a rotational job for what was supposed to be 3 years. And while I was in Denver doing product design and development work at Bell Labs, the company was split into many parts. And my home company, which I was supposed to return to after 3 years, no longer owned me. The company in Denver that was split off now owned me. And so I didn't have a path back. Well, our first child was born. I wanted to get back to Birmingham, where both of our kids' grandparents would be. And there were no jobs in the engineering part of the company that I'd left. But there was a job vacancy in a sales technical support job. So we're selling phone systems to businesses. You had kind of people that would design those. It was in the sales department, but it wasn't an engineering job per se, but it was supporting a sales force. And so that was my plane ticket to get back to where I wanted to be geographically, and I took it. Had always envisioned that my whole career would be spent doing engineering work. God had something different in mind for me. Sales was a dirty 4-letter word to me at the time. I thought salespeople were crazy. They promise all this stuff to the customers. They don't know what they're talking about. But I went in to a sales organization and realized, well, it's not quite the way I had perceived it to be. They really are good people. They really are trying to do a good job. But that was probably a pivotal point in my career. Not by my design, not the way I had envisioned my career going. But it opened me up to, in a large business, how there are many different parts in a business that have to come together effectively to deliver a product or service to a customer. And so it became really fascinating. Never lost my interest in engineering, the application of all that I'd learned in engineering. The telecommunications industry is a pretty technical field still today. There were no cell phones then, by the way. Rotary dial phones, if you don't know what that is, talk to me afterwards and I'll show you a picture. If you ever wondered why you say dial a number, well, there is a reason why you dial a number, even though y'all punch a number. But that started my career in a different path, and so eventually I ended up moving around to all different parts of the company. Loved doing something new about every 2.5, 3 years, changed jobs. Eventually became a person that they would send me into a division of the company that was broken and needed to be fixed. If you ever get an opportunity to do that, do it. There's nowhere to go but up. Okay, when you go into something that's really broken, it's awesome because immediately you can make a difference and start fixing things. It's a lot harder to go into something that's working really, really well and be given that as a job to be responsible for. Ultimately ended up supervising large groups of people. Retired having run the Southeast U.S. for AT&T. I had 35,000 employees in the Southeast U.S. Fabulous job, enjoyed the work. Glad I'm retired though, and I can spend a lot of time working here at Lipscomb as chairman of the board. So that's that's a very quick sketch through my career. But I want to talk about the things that really were important and mattered to me in my career. About 6 years into my career, interestingly enough, I initially going to college had wrestled with being a minister or being an engineer. And those are so similar, I don't know why I wrestled with that at all. But went the engineer route, but about 6 or 7 years into my career, you kind of look back and you say, well, maybe I should have been a minister. I really like people, serving people. Maybe I should have been a minister. And I actually contemplated quitting my engineering job and going into some type of full-time ministry. And as I contemplated that and prayed about it, I finally came to the realization that I was a minister, that God had put me in a place and that where I could interact with people that might never walk through the doors of a church building, but people that He was putting me with that I had an opportunity to minister to, people that were struggling with their marriage or having problems with their kids or whatever. There were ministry opportunities every day as I began to open my eyes and look at them. So from that point on in my career, I consider myself a vocational minister. I was a minister in the engineering profession, and more specifically at Bell South and AT&T. And there wasn't a week that went by that I didn't have opportunities to minister to people. And what's more important at the end as you look back on your career, you don't really look back and, I don't have any patents, or I didn't, create infinite energy, or what you look back at the end of your career on is the relationships that you had. The relationships you had with people, the meaning that brought to your life, the times that you shared together. Yeah, you remember some things about your career, but what do I miss about my job, having been retired? It's not doing the work, it's not doing the management work, it's the engineering work. I miss the people, the relationships that I had with those people. And so considering yourself a minister in your profession will really change how you go about doing your work. Now, it doesn't mean that you do any less of a good job as an engineer or as a manager or whatever role that you're given, but it does change your perspective on it. So I want to share just a couple of things that I think are important when you think about integrating your faith with your work. And I'll go back and start in Genesis chapter 3. And in Genesis chapter 3, things were going really great in the garden, and it was really cool. And then man and woman sinned against God. They broke His rules. And as part of the punishment for having broken those rules, God changed the way the garden operated. Does anybody remember what the consequences of sin were that Adam and Eve had to deal with? The ground was harder to work. There were weeds in the ground where there was no ground before. So the first thing I would remind you is when you think about work, go back to Genesis. Because if you go into work thinking that there's some perfect job, that every day is going to be lovely, that it's just all roses and beautiful pictures, and that is not the way work is going to be. There are lots of beautiful days at work, but God has put weeds in the garden because we sinned. And so part of your job, how many of you enjoy pulling weeds? Now, there's a couple of you, okay? My granddaughter hasn't figured this out yet, and she can give her a bucket and tell her, I'll give you a penny for each weed you pull, and she will go to town pulling weeds forever. I don't much enjoy pulling weeds. I don't think it's fun work. At my age, it hurts your back to bend over and get down to the ground to do that, or your knees. But I never enjoy pulling weeds. But God said, I'm going to put weeds in your garden, and a part of your work is going to be you're going to have to pull weeds. So don't go into a job expecting that you're not going to have weeds that you have to pull. There are going to be unpleasant, unfun things about even the best job that you will ever have. And that's a reminder from God that we need Him. That we sinned, there was a consequence to the sin. That wasn't the only consequence, but that was one of the consequences, is you're going to have to pull weeds in your work. You're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow, it says. So don't get discouraged at the unfun parts. They're there for a purpose. God put them there, and He knew what He was doing when He put them there. The second thing I would say is respect your leaders and always do your best work. And leaders aren't always right. They're doing the best job typically they can do. They're not always going to be right, but you should always respect your leaders. God puts people in roles of responsibility and authority. He is the source of that happening. And if you look in Ephesians, anybody have their Bible app with them? This is a Christian university. You do use the Bible here, right? So, Ephesians 6, beginning in verse 5, where Paul is actually talking about the responsibility of slaves and masters. And Paul was writing in a different age, and obviously slavery is not something that is a good thing, but it was a reality of that day. And Paul is addressing, and he talks about that slaves need to respect their masters and do their best work, even when the master is not looking. Do your best work as if you're working to the Lord. And then he says something similar to the masters and their responsibility. Respect your boss even when he's wrong, but do your best work even when he's not looking. Your work as a Christian is a reflection of your faith. Your work ethic as a Christian is a reflection of your faith. God said, do your best work even when people aren't looking. That's not only a good Christian principle to have, but it's also going to do really good things for you and your careers. One of the things I always coach young people and work on was, don't worry about the next job. It's okay to think about it and do some career planning, but don't worry about it. If you do the best job in the one you have today, be the best at the job that you have today, people will recognize your good work. They'll recognize that. You'll stand out, and that's going to advance your career. So, applying our Christian principles into our work is not only good for our faith and how people will view us in the expression of our faith, it's also good for our careers. It really works well. Decisions have consequences. Think about your decisions in work. And some decisions have good consequences associated with them, some have bad consequences associated with them. Moses made a bad decision when he didn't trust God to provide water and instead decided he needed to take it in his own hands to get water out of a rock. And as a consequence, he didn't get to personally go into the Holy Land and into the Promised Land. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a decision to make. Do I serve God even though my boss said not? And this is where the previous statement I said has the asterisk associated with it. Don't ever do something a boss tells you to do that's contrary to what God would want you to do. Don't ever lie, cheat, steal because a boss tells you to. Don't ever do that. If there's no other option, just leave that job. There are plenty of good jobs where you don't have to do that to keep your job. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego honored God. They did not denounce God. They survived the fiery furnace. Decisions have consequences. So make your decisions wisely. Operate by the golden rule. If you become a supervisor, always treat the people that work for you the way you wanted to be treated when you were being bossed. Okay? apply the golden rule in all of your relationships, but if you apply them in the work relationship, you'll also stand out in a very positive, favorable way. Humility. Somebody define humility for me. This is the interactive portion of the class. You do get credit for this class, right? So you got to work. Define humility. Yes?
It's like when you realize everything that you want, what you care about is not the most important thing.
Okay. So it's a perspective of what's important and what's not. Anybody else? Yeah.
It's a perspective of knowing that like maybe the greater good of a society or of like humankind probably is above your own good. It's like realizing where you are in the perspective of the good of society.
Okay, understanding where you are in perspective in the good of society, understanding your role, your perspective. Yes? Okay, a lack of pride and arrogance. So that would be a more traditional definition of humility. A lot of people would think of it as the antithesis of pride. Okay? I read a good definition once that humility is confidence properly placed. Okay, think about that for a minute. As a Christian, what would that mean? Humility is confidence properly placed. So humility doesn't mean you walk around with your tail stuck between your hind legs like a dog that's embarrassed. Humility doesn't mean you have no confidence. Humility doesn't mean that you don't believe that in yourself that you're capable of doing something. But humility is understanding that all of the gifts and talents and capability you have been given are not of your own doing, but they've been given to you by God. Okay, now you're working hard, you're having to take tests, you're passing them, you're doing that work. But who gave you the skills and abilities to do that? Who gave you the aptitude to do that? God doesn't give everybody those gifts. You may have noticed that engineering isn't the largest school on this campus. Okay? So God gave you some gifts and talents that He didn't give to other people. God gave the folks over in education gifts and talents that He didn't maybe give some of you. God gave people in accounting gifts and talents that you or I might not have. So I don't have to be... humility is not a lack of confidence, but it's having confidence that's properly placed. It's having confidence that's placed in God. And also a wonderful way to think about it, pride makes us artificial. Now stop and think about that for a minute. Do you know somebody that's prideful? You've been around somebody that's prideful? Pride makes us artificial. Humility makes us real. Okay. You know, when you're the CEO of a business, 35,000 employees, it can be an overwhelming task. Okay. And so understanding appropriately your position in that, I never believed that my role was any more important than the frontline employees that were touching customers. In fact, I believe just the opposite. There was not $1 of revenue that I created for the business any day that I was the CEO of the company. Not $1. But there were people out there touching customers every day that were selling a product or service or delivering a service that were creating the revenue for the company. They were the important people. My job was to make them successful. And if you advance through your career, remember what's really important in your business. And get a good handle and perspective on your role. People at the top are easily dismissed and easily replaceable. You know, just ask the Titans coach this week, okay? One day he had a job and the very next he didn't. By the way, his statement in the media and all is worth reading because it's a very humble, respectful response to that. He said, you know, I've enjoyed my time here. I'm sorry I didn't get it done. I would like to have done better. Basically, that's a humble response. So remain humble, but that doesn't mean that you don't have confidence. Doesn't mean that you don't understand and appreciate the capabilities and skills that you bring to the table. But it just reminds you who gave you those skills and capabilities and the responsibility you have to use them wisely for God. Integrity, don't make promises. Was that my shoes? What was that? Your shoe, okay. Don't make promises you can't keep. One of the things that always bothered me, you know, you would see people, they're hiring a new employee and they would say, well, within 3 years you'll get promoted. Okay? You know, in a business, don't ever fall for that bait, okay? Because it's bait. In a business, in a large business, it takes more than one person's signature to make something like that happen. And if it was something beyond what my signature could make happen, I would never promise it to anybody. In the New Testament, we learn that let your yes be yes and your no be no. Your word should be who you are. You shouldn't have to swear by anything, but just your word, your integrity should carry forward into action. So have a high value of integrity in what you do. And finally, serve others. If you'll spend your life focused on serving other people, you're going to come out on the other end a lot happier, more fulfilled person than if you spend your life trying to figure out what's in it for me. God's going to take care of you if you will take care of other people. And I've seen that many, many times in my career. So those are a few thoughts in integrating faith in your work. And I'd love to spend the rest of your time answering questions, and that may take us into some other stories. But this is your time now. Yes?
Do you have any personal examples of times when your faith and the beliefs that came with it directly clashed with something like a boss asked you to do?
Yeah. There was a question about, could y'all hear the question? Examples of times where maybe something that I was faced with came into conflict with what I thought God was wanting to do. I'll give you one example. We developed several new startup businesses along the way while I was at Bell South, and one of the startup businesses was the entertainment business, so IP-based television services. Today it would be known as Uverse. And at the time, there were a couple of startups that needed new leaders, and I was in consideration for those jobs. And one of the challenges for me was that inside that business unit, one of the things that they sold was pornography. And so most any cable television service, has pornography on it. And so I went to my boss at the time, who was working to staff some of these different jobs, and that was a really interesting business and all, but I just didn't feel comfortable running a business that part of the revenue stream was tied to that. And so I asked him if he would take my name out of consideration to run that business unit, because I didn't feel like that I could do that in good conscience and be true to who I wanted to be. So that would be one example. I was never, I'm just trying to sit here and think for sure, but I don't think I was ever asked to lie or cheat or steal. I did have, one time I went into a business unit and took over a business unit that had been running, and it was a big national sales organization. And one of the things you routinely do as a boss is you approve expense vouchers. And I had an expense voucher that came across my desk, and it had some things on it, and I began asking some questions about it. And this particular salesman, and I told you most salespeople are good, but there are still some that aren't so good. This sales guy thought it was necessary to take one of his customers to a strip joint, and he was trying to voucher the tips that he had spent in that location. And that voucher came across my desk, and needless to say, I did not approve that voucher. And we had a conversation, and he tried to argue, well, this customer wanted to do that. And I said, well, if that's what's required to get a customer to buy our service, then that's a customer we don't need. Okay, and so you will have moral dilemmas that you'll come across, and you'll just have to make decisions. What's the best right thing to do here? By the same token, you have ones opportunities that come across that what's the right thing to do here that might really benefit people. So I know we had a family that they were out of town. They had a young child who became very, very ill and ended up having a serious disease. And they needed to ultimately get from, I think they were in Washington, D.C. or somewhere up in New England. And ultimately the child was hospitalized. They needed to get the child finally back to Atlanta. And we were able to send one of our corporate airplanes to go get that person and their child and bring them back to Atlanta. So you have opportunities to use your influence to help people as well. So it's not always... So there's moral dilemmas where you got to say no, but there are also moral opportunities where you may be in a position by your authority and position that you can actually help people by saying yes. So kind of both sides there. Is going to have a negative consequence on the business. That's going to be lying to a customer, that's going to be doing something to misrepresent, that then say no. Speak up. Say, I won't be a part of that. Okay? Then you have the dilemma. You got to choose, depending on the nature of what they're doing, is this something that I've got to bring to the attention of superiors in the business? And those are hard and those are tough. But many a business has fallen because nobody would speak up. So there was a business a little bit before your time that was in the energy business. They were doing things unethically about how they were booking revenues, and that the name of the business was Enron. You could go do a case study on Enron if y'all looked at that case. Not only did that whole business collapse, but they took down one of the largest accounting firms in the nation with it, who was their accountant, because of the ethical lapses. Somebody knows that something not right is going on. And if nobody speaks up, you can end up with that level of a consequence. So I promise you there are plenty of jobs out there where you are not going to be asked to do things that are unethical, unlawful, immoral. And if you're in a situation where you're in a job where you're being put in a position to do that, go find a new job. Don't compromise yourself. Now, one thing you need to be sure you do is make sure you understand the facts. Because sometimes management cannot communicate everything it would like to all of its employees for a variety of reasons. And so sometimes things are misunderstood. There are appropriate things going on, but they're being misunderstood. So just take the time to make sure that you're understanding what's really going on. And if you're convinced by pausing and thinking and studying that something immoral, unethical, illegal is going on, say something, speak up, be bold. God did not call us to a spirit of timidity, of being timid, but to a spirit of boldness. Somebody's got to stand up for what's right. So, yes?
What would you say to the leaders of the companies like Volkswagen and GM and Takata that, that they're in some really hot water right now? What would you say to them? What would you say about their situation?
Don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't steal. Don't misrepresent. It's going to catch you. It's going to catch up with you. You just think about the way communications works in the world today. You can't go anywhere and hide anymore, okay? Somebody, if you're manipulating software to alter the emissions of a vehicle, one person didn't do that and hide it from the whole business. There had to be many people involved in doing that to make it successful. And, you've got software designers, you've got software testers, you've got mechanical testers, one person can't do that. There had to be many people involved in something that egregious. Somebody should have stood up and said something. Because if somebody stood up early and said, this is a really bad idea, and we shouldn't do this, and if you can't get attention inside the business, then go outside the business to get the attention. Again, make sure you understand the facts and you got them right. But if somebody had done that, look at what it would have saved Volkswagen. There are going to be a lot of people out of work who had nothing to do with that because their sales volume on their vehicles is going to go down and people are going to lose their jobs that had nothing to do with that are innocent bystanders to that. But somebody should have stood up and said, we're not going to do this. And again, that's where integration of faith. If you don't have faith, if there's not some bigger meaning in life, if there's not some standards and values that we should be aspiring to live our lives by, what difference would it make? Go lie, cheat, and steal all you want. But there is something bigger. There is a bigger reason that we're here. There's a bigger reason that God has gifted you with the skills and talents to go be engineers. And you need to stand up for what's right. That's a responsibility that you have. So, great question. Yes?
You mentioned you figured you were going to be like an engineer for your life and then you transitioned into sales. How were you reassured that that was the right decision? And then also, did you have to pick up extra classes or certifications?
Yeah. So what you're going to find when I'll take the second half of the question first. What you're going to find when you go into the corporate world, first of all, I was talking to some juniors and seniors earlier today. How many of you are seniors? How many of you have gotten now almost to the end of your career and gone, man, I don't know enough to go out and be an engineer? Anybody having that feeling? Wow, yeah. It's man, I thought I was going to be really smart after 4 years of this stuff, and about all I figured out now is how much I don't know. And that's a very healthy graduation spot to be in. You know plenty to be a good engineer. Okay, let me reassure you of that. It feels really different than that now, I know, but you know plenty to be a good engineer. But you have just begun your educational experience. So I'm a pilot. When you get your pilot's license after 40, you can get it with as little as 40 hours of training with an instructor. Now think about how many hours you drove with a parent, a car, before you could get a driver's license. 40 hours. You can get a license, go fly a plane by yourself. No, you've gotten a license to learn. So you're going to graduate with a degree in engineering with a propensity now to go and to continue to learn. And most of the businesses that you will work for will continue to invest in your learning and training. So yes, I learned things on my own, but I also got training along the way. Ultimately, my company sent me to to Harvard to an advanced management program, which was basically an MBA in 3 months, 6 days a week of class, very intense program, fun program. So that, I forgot the first half of your question. So.
How you were reassured.
Oh, how I was reassured. Confidence in God. That, God is orchestrating this whole thing. God is orchestrating every move in my career, and I'm just going to trust God. He opened a door. I had a reason I wanted to be back in Birmingham because I wanted my grandkids to grow up knowing their grandparents. Because we had a great relationship with both sets of grandparents, and I wanted my kids to know their grandparents. And so God opened the door to allow that to happen. So, and then He kept opening other doors. And so I just had to put my faith and confidence that God was orchestrating this. And that's what I did. And it was a lot of fun, by the way. Getting out of your box of comfort is a really, really healthy thing. Okay? The old adage, no pain, no gain. You want to grow, get out of your box of comfort. Go do something you've never done before. I'm a pilot. I like to fly planes. A few years ago, I went and jumped out of a plane. Just to get out of my box of comfort. Okay? So, we got time for maybe one or two more questions. Well, let me just close with a very quick story. I'll make it much shorter than I sometimes tell it, but kind of to that question about how God orchestrates things and about the confidence you get. 7 years ago, on December 2nd, on Sunday morning, I went to church. I thought it was going to be a normal Sunday morning. Went to worship first. After worship, I was in the hall visiting with some people before Sunday school class started. Began getting a tightness in my chest, began getting a pain that went down my left arm. And I realized, with having no previous heart issues, no other health issues, that I was having the classic symptoms of a heart attack. My brother-in-law was standing there, and I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. I need to go to the hospital. So he got me, sent somebody to go find my wife. We turned and walked towards the exit door of the church building, which was about as far from here to there. I got close to the door, my head started getting dizzy, and I said, I'm not going to make it. And I collapsed on the floor. My heart was stopped. I was laying dead on the floor in the church building. Well, in a few minutes, there was a nurse who was standing by the door of the building who had been trying to get out of the building, saw me collapse. They sent runners to rooms in the building to look for a doctor. Ultimately, a doctor came, did CPR on me, got my heart started again, got me to the nearest hospital. They did a procedure to put stents on me. It was a Catholic hospital, by the way, and I didn't realize till after the fact that when a Catholic priest shows up in your emergency room at the hospital, that's not a good sign. I thought it was a wonderful visit that we were having, but they're only usually dispatched because they think the guy's not going to make it. So I could embellish the story a lot more, but obviously I'm here today to tell you the story. So I survived the event, had 3 stents placed in my heart. But after a heart attack, I went back to talk to the people that had been involved in my resuscitation. And the doctor who did the CPR on me said, it was a really interesting Sunday for me. She said, I was at church, had been to worship. I had a nephew in town. I was going to go visit my nephew. I left the building, went to the parking lot, got to my car keys in hand, and she said, I heard a voice that said, you need to go to Sunday school. And she paused for a minute and said, wow, I've never experienced anything like that. And then she said, I heard it a second time, you need to go to Sunday school. So she turned around, walked back into the church building, sat down in a Sunday school classroom, and within a minute of her sitting down in that Sunday school class, somebody came into the room and said, "Is there a doctor in here?" And she is the doctor that came to my side that did CPR on me, that got my heart started again until they could get me to the hospital and fix what was broken in it. Do you trust God? Is God present? Is God active in this world? Is He active and involved in your life? Is He orchestrating things? I certainly believe so. My perception of how God might speak to someone was probably a little more conservative than that, until I had a lady tell me that God said, "You need to go to Sunday school," and she's the one who did CPR on me. God is active and involved in your lives. Sometimes you might not see Him so visibly. It's working in the background. Sometimes you're going to see Him very clearly working. I know every day God's working. Some days I see Him. On that particular December the 2nd, 2007, God was very visibly working in my life. Retired a couple of years after that event, and have spent the last 5 years or 6 years doing full-time, not-for-profit work. I do as much work as I ever did before. Just nobody gives me a paycheck anymore to do it. But it's a wonderful, wonderful season of life for me. I love being with Lipscomb. I love being with students. I love seeing how y'all are walking your faith out, how you're serving your fellow mankind. You're a blessing to me, and I've enjoyed being with you today. But understand, God's here. God's in this room. God will be involved in your life if you'll let Him and allow Him. And He will do miraculous things over the entirety of your life. So go forward, do good for your fellow man, be great professional engineers. God bless you in your efforts.
One second, I got something for you. Chairman Scobey, we have a little gift for you as kind of a token of our appreciation.
Okay, awesome. Do I get to,
You bet. Go
get to
ahead.
open it? Oh, great. Beautiful clock. And you can see how it works, so don't have to take it apart to see how it works. So, thank you so much. Enjoyed being with you today. So.